Good on this. Aha.
That's the plan, right?
All right. Well, I believe that I have the recording started. Do you mind if I record this in case people want to watch a video?
No.
All right, wonderful. So I'm so glad that you all signed up for this lay member to annual conference class. My name is robinkelby, and I am the Southwest District lay leader. So if you look in the discipline, one of my job is to do stuff like this to really be training our laity. And it looks like we have somebody joining on the Zoom who's connecting to audio. Hello, Christine. It looks like you're muted if you're. Oh, there's your bright and shining face.
There we go. Hello.
Hello. So I figure to start off, let's see. We'll just start off with introductions. How about Christine, if you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go around everybody that's in the room.
Okay. My name is Christine Claes. I live in Stitzer, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've ever heard of Stitzer. It's a very tiny little town, but I go to Fenimore United Methodist Church. I did not grow up Methodist, but before COVID, I became a lay member to the annual conference, and nobody could tell me really what my job was. So when I saw this, I thought, great opportunity to learn more.
Well, wonderful. So if you could include a fun fact, that would also be nice.
A fun fact. Well, I don't know if I think it's fun, but I married my husband and we have, well, now 16 grandchildren. So I have 15 through his children, and my son just had one in November. So we're got lots of grandkids.
Well, cool. Oh, and I see there's Pat. Hello, Pat.
Hi, Robin. How are you?
I'm good. So, Pat, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Pat Gallis from Merrimack United Methodist Church. I've been going to the annual conference, I think about, maybe 6 years, maybe longer. I never had a class either. I kind of learned from the people around me is how I did it. And that was vague too. So anyway, I'm excited to be here. My fun fact is that I'm in Florida and I'm enjoying it.
Nice.
And I know where Stitzer is. I have, I don't know if you know Bev Keto. I don't know if you know her.
Heard the name, but
okay. And then I have cousins in Lancaster, and they used to tell fun stories of Stitzer when we were growing up.
Well, great. Wonderful to have you on the Zoom. So for everybody in the room, if you could give your name, your church, how long you've been a lay member to annual conference, and a fun fact that can't be one of the other 3 facts that you just mentioned.
I'm Connie Meyer. I'm here from the Sun Prairie United Methodist Church. I have been a lay member for
a while,
29, 30 years. When Susan Bresser was here, she asked if I would be on the committee, and I'm now on the Program and Arrangements Committee for annual conference. So I don't actually get to sit much in the room in the plenary area. I'm out herding people and volunteers and registration and that type of thing for annual conference. So as far as our enjoyment of this church, I belong to 4 music groups, and I belong to another music group outside of the church. And I do leadership training and lead Bible classes, and I'm in charge of the sanctuary decorations and the communion stewards and a few other things. So church is my life, and I'm happy.
Wonderful. Thanks, Connie.
My name's Rex Tilley. I'm from Brooklyn, Wisconsin. I've at 18, I left the church. 40 years later, I came back to the church. I've been a member of Brooklyn Church again for 10 years. And I guess the fun fact is between my wife and I, we've got 10 kids. And last count, 34 grandkids.
Wow.
So I win.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Nobody's gonna argue.
Uh,
All right, my name's William Deek and I'm here from Sugar River United Methodist Church in Verona, where I've been attending now for 14 years. This is my first time to be a lay anything officially. So I'm looking forward to being this delegate for conference just to see what that's like. Kind of fell into the role because we had a really great person doing it before me who then ended up getting promoted to
Not gonna say who that
to
is.
district level. I'm not gonna say who it is, but so I'm gonna be working to try to do that. A fun fact about me, aside the fact that I don't have any grandchildren, is that I have taught kids from age 3 to pretty much 25 years old in my life, and I'm not a teacher. So
I mean, you've taught me and I'm 25.
that's true.
Yeah.
I did teach you in a course actually last fall, so about financial peace. So
Yeah.
Mike Bialke from Lodi United Methodist, although we live in DeForest. I think I've only been a lay member 4 years, give or take. But my first church position was on staff parish in 1973. And the fun fact is not church related, but it's shows about strength and endurance and all that. Is Nancy and I attended the Ice Bowl in Green Bay, December 31st, 1967.
Wow.
Before we were married. I'm Nancy Bialke, Mike's other half. So I won't repeat all that. And how long have I been a member of a lay member? Well, I couldn't figure it out, but I think I started back when conference was meeting in Stevens Point. And that's back in the 80s,
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
But a fun fact, maybe back at the beginning of time in 68, they met in, I think it was 69, they met at Green Lake at the conference center there. And I worked in the typing up the little newsletter that they put out every day, which, you know, that technology is long since gone, but that was, you know, what I did back then.
Well, cool. I am just so glad that you all are here. And let's start off with an opening prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the wonderful folks I have beside me in this room and all over the place on Zoom. May we have really good discussions and learning, all guided but by what you have taught us in the ways that we are called to serve your people and your church. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So for those of us in the room, we had the handouts that I passed out or that people have printed out from the email. And I'm mostly just gonna kind of go off of that with some questions that I added in. So to start off, you know, in terms of what it means to be a lay member to annual conference, I was trying to think of just like a 1-sentence summary of what even is this. And what I came up with was that lay members to annual conference link their local church to the annual conference and the general church. Do you guys have any other things you would add on to that definition?
I think that's a good definition.
I think I would add on for me, it's also very spiritual. You can feel it in the room, and I think that I am blessed to be able to attend it.
I like that, Pat. Adding more spiritual energy into the role than just I go there and I attend the meeting and everything.
Is that as long as it goes?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I didn't pack any external speakers. Yeah, feel free to move over. So, in terms of where the Book of Discipline, talks about the lay member to annual conference role, that's going to be mostly in paragraph 2550 at 2251.2. And there's also some references in paragraph 602.4 through 7. So whenever I talk about the Book of Discipline, does everybody know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Good.
We call it the Book of Helpful Suggestions.
There you go. I like that better. I like that better.
Heard-
That's,
Yeah, yeah.
I've definitely not heard anything about the Book of Discipline before. Why
Oh,
that might be relevant nowadays.
oh, man. Yeah,
Well,
Help
first you have to
suggestion.
memorize it.
yeah, exactly. So,
Got
that's,
afternoon time.
the nice thing is that there, you can, both have a paper copy of the latest Book of Discipline, which is of course the one from 2016, because we haven't gotten to have a new one yet. But you can also go on to Cokesbury and access the Book of Discipline online. So if you, maybe don't have your paper copy with you, or maybe you're just trying to find all of the references for something, like whenever I became the district lay leader, I took that online version and I searched for all the references to district lay leader, and I found all kinds of interesting stuff. So let's actually take a look at, the discipline and what the requirements are, just to, refresh our memory on how this role is supposed to, be lived out. So in terms of the requirements, the lay member to annual conference must be elected at a charge conference, which usually is held every fall, but it can be called, special for different purposes. And the lay member has to come from the professing membership of a local church, and they have to be in good standing for at least 2 years prior to their election. And you also have to be an active participant in the broader United Methodist Church for at least 4 years prior to their election. So you really wouldn't want somebody who is completely new to United Methodism serving in this role. Because I mean, there's a lot you got to get used to that we do differently from other denominations. You can also elect alternate lay members to serve as a backup just in case something happens. And usually it's a good idea to identify, not just one person to fill this job, but other people that can also potentially attend in their stead.
Define good standing.
Yeah, so for good standing, I believe that means that you have to be active in the life of the church.
Oh,
You wouldn't want to give it to somebody who just, they aren't really in worship all, ever, or
Christmas and Easter.
exactly.
Priesters, yeah.
Yeah, you really want somebody who is,
Just, I was just curious. It was.
yeah, that's a
Interesting
good
word.
question. And in terms of what the Book of Discipline says for the responsibilities, that first paragraph is really, what I put in the requirements section above. They're elected annually or quadrennially. I don't think our annual conference has any direction for how long a lay member to annual conference should serve.
I was told for life.
Yeah, it's
And it's
interesting.
basically been that so far.
When you give it, they don't take it away.
Yeah. So,
You just get
Pretty much
promoted to
everything else
program
that way too,
arrangement.
the church.
yeah. So in terms of the next paragraph, it's a nice big block that, the lay members and alternates shall have been professing members in good standing of the United Methodist Church for at least 2 years and have been active participants for at least 4 years next preceding their election, except if it's a newly organized church. Because then, they might not have been around for 4 years, and they will have the privilege of representation at the annual conference session. No local pastor shall be eligible as a lay member or alternate, and United Methodist churches that become part of an ecumenical shared ministry shall not be deprived of their right of representation by a lay member in the annual conference. The lay member of the annual conference, along with the pastor, shall serve as an interpreter of the actions of the annual conference session. These persons shall report to the local church council on actions of the annual conference as soon as possible, but no later than 3 months after the close of conference. And then finally, Additionally, the lay member participates in the annual conference sessions and votes on all matters except those pertaining to ministerial relations and serves as a member of the charge conference, church council, finance committee, and staff pastor parish relations. So with all that said, I came up with some discussion questions, just, looking at that language and stuff. So I can see from the look
I
on
have a
William's face that you got a question. So what is your question?
So the way I read that is that if you are a lay member, you have to be on all of those committees.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that at Sugar River, where William and I are from, we do not have all of those committees because we have something called a servant leadership board that basically fulfills all of those committees in one. We have,
Except finance.
well, good point. I thought that they were still a subset of SLD.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, well, interesting. Learn something new every day.
But that tells me here that Connie needs to be on finance.
Well, we've got a different type of setup too. that,
Okay.
We changed to a leadership thing where
Mhm.
just, we have an individual from each committee goes to the leadership meeting.
Oh yeah, I've been
Yeah.
in churches that do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did that maybe 5 years ago, and it worked so much better because otherwise I was going to meetings every single day
Yeah.
of the month.
Yeah.
Well, and are you?
It's got to be ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's one of those where, in the spirit of what the discipline is really trying to get at is that you really have to not just be involved in one aspect of the church, you really need to have at least a little bit of a piece
Yeah,
of the
you
pie
need,
of
you need to be
everything.
able to touch every piece and know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Because every piece potentially, could be something that's up for discussion at annual conference.
No, what we do is between Nancy and I, she goes to finance
Mm,
and I go to the other one. I mean, we cover them,
mhm.
but it's between the two of us. It's kind of what you said. If you went to all those, you'd have to take a cot along.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
that sense, I think it's asking a lot of a lay person to be, if your church has all those committees, to be on every one. I personally.
Let's see, I think Christine and then Pat.
So my husband is like the head of staff parish at our church, and he always says, you can't go along, you can't know about this stuff. And I'm like, and now I see that I should be a part of the committee, so he could actually tell me what's going on at those committees, because I'm part of finance as well.
Mhm.
I also do the website at our church. And it's nice to know what's going on, because a lot of times I find out later on. So technically I should be on staff parish is what I'm hearing.
That raises some interesting questions as well, because if you look in the discipline for, how the staff parish and other local church committees are supposed to function, I think that there are some rules about, married couples and what the mix is for different committees and such. So that might be something that you need to work on with the rest of your church for exactly where you fit in, because according to this, you should be on staff pastor parish. And unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with those sections to be able to tell you outright whether or not you can just automatically sit on it or not. But that is something for you to work out at Fenimore, what works. And Pat.
Okay, what I was chair of PPRC, I resigned, I got somebody else, but as a lay member, I have the right to attend any meeting I want, is what it was put to me. And I'm automatically, I sit in on, still I'm a member of PPRC, but I'm also chair of the board now. And so I like to go where I'm needed. Like for our worship committee and for our fundraising, the one woman is very ill with cancer. So I said I would step up and help that when I get back on fundraising. So I have the right, but PPRC is the only confidential, what do I want to say, group in the church is the way I'm understanding. Is that true, Robin?
Yes, I believe that the actions of the church council is something where, not everybody that attends may vote, but it shouldn't be closed so that members of the church can't know what's going on. Also, for those in the room, I didn't realize that my Zoom audio wasn't turned up all the way, so it should be more helpful for those in the room to be able to hear. Sorry about that. I thought that my computer system was the same. So in terms of, how that approach of, kind of checking in on different committees, I think that that can also be a strategy for maybe not having to be there every time, but still having a presence in each of those locations. In terms of the questions that I thought of, how does it feel to have the privilege of representation? I thought it was an interesting way of putting it.
It can be challenging because not every issue is approved by every member of the church. So when you have an issue and you've had congregational members from, I'm going to say, both sides talk to you, and you're the one that's representing the church and you get to vote at annual conference, that can be challenging.
Definitely. It kind of gets back to the way you see yourself. Are you a representative of your church, or are you voting your own conscience? And that's something that, whenever your church is selecting you in the church conference where you're approved, that's something that they have to think about. How does this person align with us, but also is going to be making their own decisions at the time of, not everybody in the church is going to be able to text you and be like, this is what I think about what's going on right now. So, yeah. Let's see, Pat.
I think that's where that spiritual part comes in when you're there. You hear the testimony of other people on things, and some decisions are really, really hard, but I always just go by where God is leading me. I get nudged. So that's who I listen to.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that, Pat. There's a lot of discernment that has to happen at conference. And some of it you can prepare for ahead of time with things like the workbook. And there's others that just, you have to be figuring it out as it goes along. Why do you think the discipline stipulates that a lay member or alternate cannot be a local pastor?
Because they're out of touch. Well, you have small churches. We have to, the same people are on every committee. You have to ignore the book of discipline because there's no way that you can possibly meet the requirements that it sets out. So how much of this is supposed to be dispensational? Do we, all right, we'd like to do this, but we can't. Because in my church, you're not supposed to have family members according to the book of discipline on committees. I'm related to all of Brooklyn. Congregation is related to me. How can you possibly do this? And then to say, you have to be a member of good standing for 4 years. We're just happy if someone wants to walk through the door. And to say, and what that's the problem with these churches is we're rejecting people because we hold them to a standard that we can't possibly uphold. So why are we doing that?
Yeah, I think that part of it is just, figuring out, we have these lovely, discipline practices that come down from above, but we have to interpret them to our own context. That, you're right. In a church where it's mostly a collection of families, like there's some things where you have to make some hard decisions about, how we make this fair, but also respect the people we got with us.
We don't trust the conference as far as, helping smaller churches because it's easy for them to consolidate into a bigger church and let the smaller churches die.
It's definitely a hard thing. One of the things that I was thinking about with, no local pastor shall be a lay member of annual conference or alternate is that local pastors that aren't ordained have different representation at conference. And there's some votes where they cannot vote the way that we can as lay members. So whenever they become a local pastor, then they're not eligible for some of the different kinds of things. That can be things like constitutional amendments that might be voted on following a general conference. So I think that that language is in there so that we don't have a local pastor trying to take away power away from the lay people, and all that. Because yeah, it really should be making sure that we have that balance between clergy and laity so that we don't have clergy dictating everything, but we also make sure that we have that lay voice on the other side.
I think a big part of it is you don't want to conflict the interest, but that's on paper.
Mhm.
And I think you just gave a good example of however there are times when you have to, in a sense, negotiate. It's like it's both and it's not one or the other, because you do get in tough situations. How are you going to put people on a committee and they're all related?
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
You could have a pastor who's been appointed at a church that's in a smaller area, who would then be able to vote on an amendment to close and consolidate all small churches because they don't want to be there. They definitely could not be voting in the interest of the congregation,
Mhm.
who's already kind of being led by a singular person.
Yeah.
So having multiple representation, multiple facets is almost like a check and balance.
Considering how much of our discipline is built off of, matching or mirroring the US, government system, we fall into the legislature the same way that, there are different congresses at the state level and the country and all of that. So what do you think the importance is of reporting to the local church council about the actions of annual conference?
I mean, that's why we go. I mean, things happen there and we have to disseminate the news to the people at the tail end of it. They need to know what's going on at a higher level. Otherwise we lose that relationship among congregations and among different areas of the state.
Yeah. And it's a way for us to, kind of take back what is really going to impact us versus things that might not be as much of a concern as well. It really should be tailored for not just what happens, but how, we are changed because of it. In my work as a lay member of annual conference, I've been doing this for about 4 years now, and I believe that it should be not just the church council and that part of the membership. I think that the whole church needs to know about what happens, because there can be things that if you see something in the news or you hear rumblings about something that happened at conference, then it can be really easy to not really be getting that firsthand account of I was there when we were talking about this and this is how it really went down, and this is what it really means. That can just be really useful.
That is one of the things that we do here at Sun Prairie, is that after annual conference, there is a presentation that is presented to all of the congregation, a video presentation and an in-person presentation at one of the church services, not at one, at all three of the church services. So everybody gets to hear what happened.
That's the way that I've handled it as well. Because I think that, you have to figure out what works for your church, but then, getting it out in front of the congregation just really helps people get excited about it too.
Yeah. And you talk about hearing something in the news. Here's here's a fake thing. This is not a real thing, so don't panic. But let's say that at conference, there was a vote to lower the mandatory retirement age of clergy to 60. Let's say that happened. There'd be a lot of congregations that would go into a panic because they have folks that are 61, like ours does. So there'd be questions about that immediately, and a news story, something that actually gets out from our conference to a local news station, is going to have almost none of the actual details.
Right.
But to be able to present that and say, have all of that background that was discussed, and to have the ability to answer the questions immediately for people concerned about it, is vital to not cause panic and immediate change. Again, fake issue, not a thing. hope that's not a thing. If that comes up in June, it was not my fault. I did not predict anything.
Connie, you better take note.
I'll
So I
miss-
have a question, because I only went to annual conference in 2019 and it's been online, hasn't it been since, or not, whatever. So I don't know what it looks like. Like, what am I supposed to do as a lay member? Like, when you get those booklets beforehand, do you present these questions to your, these things that you vote on to the church? And I don't know. That's why I guess why I took this class, is like, what do I do as a lay member for my church? So.
You're jumping ahead a little bit. 'cause-
Okay. Well, I didn't, I was just like,
Yeah.
what do I want to know what people do, so I know what to do, because I don't think we do any of that stuff.
Definitely.
So much of that has changed over the years. And in some ways it's good, in some ways it's not. But I mean, I can remember going to annual conference and it would get to the last day and you'd have all these resolutions for general conference and it's midnight. And pretty soon they lump everything together and take one vote and everyone goes home. I think things now are discussed more in committees before time and brought as a consent agenda. I mean, years ago, you used to vote on everything and it was a long ordeal.
And we're in a little bit, we're going to talk about how this annual conference in particular is going to be a little bit different from, there's kind of cycles of what happens at annual conference. And there's a couple of big things coming up this year that, you're going to need to be prepared for. So, yeah.
When you sign up for annual conference, I'm part of the program and arrangements committee that plans annual conference. And there is an opportunity for you to participate in a program. It's called, I'm not sure what it's called this year, but it's basically the 101 guide to what you are as a lay member to annual conference. And they are going to be done on Zoom, and it's a wonderful informative place where you can ask questions of the people that can give you the answers that tell you these are the responsibilities of you with this title that you now have in your hand. So I would watch for that and take the time to sign up for that particular time. It's about an hour long and it's a very informative program where you find out this is what a lay leader does at annual conference.
Mhm.
When is it annual conference for this year? I guess
It is June 9 through 12. And that last day on the 12th, which is a Monday, that is the extra learning day.
Which is still being discussed as to what we're going to do because
Yeah.
the attendance has not been as good as it could be. We're anticipating there might be changes for that. And
So,
stay tuned for that one. The program and arrangements are still working on it. We talked about it for an hour yesterday at a
But-
meeting.
Just to hitchhike on that, though, I think there's been a significant change in-person communication at annual
Absolutely.
conference.
mhm.
I mean, one of the things that used to be is, that was one time during the year, you got to see a lot of people and interact. And we can do the technology thing, at least for me, it's a different ball game.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that has also played into, I'm gonna say, the challenge of the overall role of the lay member has increased
Yeah.
because we have less communication, contact, whatever, with conference staff. I mean,
Yeah.
DSs used to, you'd see them once a year. Well, that's historical.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Zoom is a wonderful thing, but it also is a great detriment to having actually running the
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah.
That's been a big problem with program and arrangements too, is the people that aren't there, but they're on Zoom. And
Yeah.
how do you balance that with the people that are there?
Give you credit for working at that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's
Let's see. I think Pat, I saw your hand.
Yeah, we were speaking about the dates. I saw somewhere on the conference news or some newsletter I got that we may be because of all the volume of stuff that has to be done this annual conference, they're thinking maybe the 12th would be used that Monday for overflow. Does anybody know about that?
That's still all under consideration as a program and arrangements person. We're battling with all of those issues.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as soon as we figure it out, which we know needs to be yesterday, you'll be hearing.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, there's two other things that I wanted to touch on before I move on. Whenever it talks about ministerial relations, which is the only thing that we can't vote on, in terms of how that has actually lived out, is that there is something called the clergy session. And that has to do with like basically approving, new clergy to continue on in their like whole system of how people go from being, regular people to being clergy. So in terms of, whenever you're actually in the plenary sessions, you will not have an instance where there is something that you cannot vote on, because it's really designed that anything that, you can't vote on as a layperson, it happens in the clergy session and you just don't have to, really have that in your mind at all. So that's really nice. And the other thing is that there are other laity besides the lay members to annual conference from each church that also have voice and vote. And by voice and vote, I mean they are able to speak to matters that come before conference. They're able to get up to a microphone or, unmic themselves on Zoom, and as well as be able to actually vote on things and have their voice heard that way. And that includes people like me. As a district lay leader, I am now a member of the annual conference in my own right. I don't need to be elected by my church because that is handled at the annual conference level. So that's what happened whenever I was a lay member at Sugar River, and then I became the district lay leader, and then I had to figure out who the heck was going to take it over from me for Sugar River to still have that representation. So that's whenever I had a very long call with William, and that's really where
That was a long call.
it was. And it was one of those where I was thinking that, you really have to be having those conversations with anybody that's taking on this role. And wouldn't it be nice if we had a class for that? So I really appreciate y'all coming together for this. So let's see. So one other thing that I wanted to really touch on is how the lay leader and the lay member to annual conference are related. A lot of times people kind of use these terms interchangeably, but they're really separate roles in the church, although one person can wear both hats. Really, both roles are focused on linking the local church to the broader community and the world. And this is lived out in slightly different ways, where like the lay member to annual conference is more focused on connecting the local church to larger church structures, the district, the annual conference, reporting back on things that are happening at jurisdictional conference and general conference. And the lay leader is more focused on developing and advocating for the leadership in the local church to grow disciples. And if they aren't the same person, then you really have to collaborate between the two, so that you're able to, really be thinking about both sides of that equation. It's really important to know what the rest of the church is doing, but also how that's going to impact the ways that we're out in the community and the world. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I used to be a lay member. Now I'm a lay leader because of my involvement with program and arrangements. I can't even be on the plenary floor because I'm running the program along with the rest of the committee. So I never get an opportunity. For a while, we tried to have it. So, well, we're going to do a vote. So you've got to be in the plenary floor. Well, not when I'm resolving a problem out on the walkway with people. I don't get to go into the plenary. I watch it online and closed circuit, but I don't have an actual voice of the opinion. We have three other people that come from our church. We're a big church, so we've got representation by three that actually do the voting. So I know what's going on, but there is a very definite distinction between the two. And in a church of our size, I couldn't carry both hats.
Yeah. So in terms of kind of looking at stuff, I'm gonna skip ahead in my PowerPoint and actually let's talk about how you actually do this annual conference thing, because I think that that is important. That's gonna be on page 3 of your lovely handout, if you have that, that paper virtually. So I was really trying to think of all the things you gotta do to make sure that you're prepared once you get there and you're all ready. So the first thing is that you have to make sure that you are signed up for the conference e-news. So is there anybody that doesn't get like those nice weekly emails and devotions from the bishop? And because if you're getting all of that, then that's a big way to make sure that you're just being informed about everything that goes on. You can also just check the conference website every once in a while, if that's easier for you as well. We already talked about the dates for annual conference. This year's session is going to be June 9 through 12. And in terms of
Where?
that is going to be in
Green Bay.
Green Bay at the K1 Center.
And this is the last year for that contract, I believe. So it might move around after this year.
And we have no idea where we're going in next year.
Thank you, Connie, for that.
That's another issue we're talking about.
Yeah.
We haven't
Good to
gotten
have you
anybody-
here.
Haven't gotten anybody big enough that can handle us yet.
Mhm.
That's the problem.
So for this year, it's Green Bay, and there will also be the laity session. So there's the annual conference session where we're there and we're voting, and before annual conference or sometime during annual conference occasionally, they will have a session that is focused on just us laity, because if the clergy get their own session, then why can't we have one too, although we don't vote on anything? So that is going to be held before conference this year. I don't want to say the date just in case it changes, but as a representative on Conference Board of Laity, you can be sure that we are working on planning that and when that's going to be. That is most likely going to be virtual on Zoom because it's not going to be there in person. But I would encourage that, maybe if your church has a watch party or, some other way of just, watching it on a recording or something afterward, like it's good information. So I highly encourage you to engage with that. In terms of other things to keep in mind, you can really coordinate with other folks from your congregation and area for a lot of support in this process. Your pastor should most likely be going to annual conference too, so you'll likely have them. There might be other churches in your charge or that are close by that you can also coordinate with. Is there anybody that's interested in sharing a hotel room or carpooling with you? Are you planning on getting the meal plan, which would be served at the KI Convention Center? Or are you planning on just like getting outside food somewhere in Green Bay? It's really good to think about those things ahead of time because there's going to be hundreds of people making their own decisions, and it's good to be planning ahead. And making sure that you're coordinating and figuring out who you're going to know who's there already can be really useful for things, if something's coming up or you might be late to a session, you're just trying to figure things out, make sure you have people's phone numbers. You can also check your church's budget to see if there's funding to offset costs like registration, hotels, meals, gas, all of that stuff. That is something that your church should be allocating at least some funding for, even if it's not going to cover everything, because that is really important to make sure that, that burden isn't falling completely on you. So that would be something where, if there isn't funding for that that's set aside, that in next year's budget conversation, you might want to think about that. Are there any questions so far? Yeah.
How do you become a lay speaker and how do you stay a lay speaker? How do you keep certified?
Lay speakers are completely separate.
And laymen, we'll say.
Yeah. If you're a lay member that's elected by your church.
Yes.
Then every year at church conference, your name has to be on that paperwork. So then that's the way that the church and the conference knows that, okay, this is the person that we're going to have from Brooklyn or Lodi or wherever. And whenever they are working on registrations, then, they will be working with your church to be able to figure out, okay, who's getting registered, because maybe something came up and we have to use an alternate, all that kind of good stuff.
Because you'd be surprised how many people don't know just the basics about what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And we're having a Bible study here we do a Bible study on Mondays, and one of the things that we're gonna be studying is the makeup of the Methodist Church. Because they have no clue how it's run. And
Oh, yeah.
there's not a whole lot of help coming through anywhere as far as why things are and how do you stay qualified.
Mhm. Exactly. In terms of the actual registration process, that's something where, again, you're gonna have to work with your pastor and maybe your church secretary if you have one. Because you gotta know who's registering you, if they're gonna do it, if you're gonna do it, how all that works.
Yeah, all of the information is sent to your church,
Mhm.
and you should be able to get all of those answers from your church, because that's part of the responsibility of the conference as a whole. They send the information to every church to show you how you go about becoming registered, and at the charge conference that you have in your church,
Mhm.
that's where your leadership approves you to be the person that is going to be going.
Mhm.
You should have a form to fill out every year.
Mm.
I know I fill out a form every single year and have for 40 some years about what I have been doing connected to our local church.
That's for lay speakers. That's separate
Yeah.
from being a lay member. For a lay member, all you have to do is put your name on the nominations
You are right,
report.
yeah, okay.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of lay roles that get all tied up with each other because a lot of people wear different hats. So yeah.
Did your question get answered?
Not really.
Go
I think
talk
those-
to your leadership at your church, your
I'm the
pastor
leadership.
or your secretary.
Is your question about being a lay leader
or
a lay speaker?
Well, lay speaking is one of the things that I want to question as to why we have no classes and how are we supposed to stay up on classes if we have no classes? And then how do you advance from lay speaker to lay representative?
Yeah, so there is no relationship between lay
Yeah.
speakers and lay representatives. They are completely separate roles in the church. So the thing is that we have not been doing a good job with our lay servant ministries in the district over the past couple of years. There has been nothing. And we are trying to change that actively right now. And because we know that this is wrong and that we have been failing the laity of our district. And I think that that is something that,
Zoom has-
I understand that.
COVID has affected a lot
Exactly.
of the rhythm, a
And-
lot of the rhythm.
And even before then, there was a lapse in leadership that was failed to be filled for years. That is, one of the reasons why we do not have our crap together as a district. But that is something that I promise you as the district lay leader, we are working on addressing because
Oh,
I'm
okay.
angry about it. And like, whenever I have been as a side gig, calling all of the lay speakers and lay servants in order to do all of this stuff. Brief tangent.
Just to
yeah.
add a comment. Because to me, that's a key piece, because those persons who get that lay speaker piece just might be somebody that end up going into ministry.
Mhm.
It's kind of a one portal way to get in there. So if that part falls apart, it's got a kind of a ripple effect to it. And I agree with you, Robin. It's
Yeah.
a negative ripple effect.
Exactly. And really for the purposes of, this, like a lot of times it is the lay speakers, the people who are most engaged in the church that might be the lay representative. A lot of times people do wear multiple hats. So yeah, I would say work with your church to figure out, who your lay representative is. And if there isn't one and you're interested, then you have to be elected at a church conference. So you'd have to go through the, calling a church conference. But you can do that any time of year. I have had church conferences called for me to, just everybody gets the, vote on one thing. And that, I was the subject of that one thing. So yeah, I'd really encourage you to just, work with your pastor and your church on that.
Just back to you, because I was with Nancy with your question, and you may want to hitchhike on this, Robin, is what might be helpful to your church and to you is to actually have someone who is a lay speaker come and have conversation with you about what that
We have
process.
none.
No, but I'm just saying, I think I
Yeah.
can vote for it, but we got a couple of them in our church.
Yeah.
And maybe one of them might be willing to come down and explain it, but I think like Robin has access to all of that stuff.
Well, and
You
it's-
should, all the
yeah.
district superintendent also would be a person to contact about being a
Yes.
lay speaker
Yeah,
versus a lay member to annual conference.
We've been shaking this tree for years now.
mhm,
I think you need to get the saw out.
yeah, and I do just,
I agree with you there.
I do caution right now, Amanda is very, very busy with disaffiliation, that, we have the biggest burden of our entire conference in terms of the weight of the disaffiliating churches. A quarter of the churches in our district are still on the pathway. They may not make it and actually leave, but that's still a lot of courting that we're having to do. Pat,
Okay, was listening to this conversation, and a more appropriate venue might be like a week from today, you're doing a laity speaker thing, right?
no,
lay-
that's still
no?
the lay leader.
Oh, a lay leader. Okay, you're still doing the lay leader thing.
Yeah, and the fun thing is that, that later this spring, it is my goal for there to be at least 3 classes taught in the district, in person and with Zoom, so that we can start to get things going again. I don't want to,
As laity, as lay speaker.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there is stuff that's gonna be coming down the pike.
A lot of lay
because, you know,
That's what Robin is doing, is
yeah, because
is planning all of this. You're kind of speaking to the choir, because she is planning everything that was, we were a long time without a representative for the Southwest Conference. Ever since Steve Mayashiba died, and I lost track of how many years, at least 6, I think.
yeah,
It's been a long time. So
Really?
whenever I took this on, there was nothing
yep.
I inherited in terms of how the heck you're supposed to do any of this. So I'm
Right.
making it up as I go along. And, I think that at this point, in an ideal world, we would have more structures around this, but we're starting from scratch. So as the district lay leader, I am really pushing for a lot of things to be better. And I want to keep moving because there's more stuff
Okay.
to talk about, but I do
Yes.
really appreciate your insight because I completely agree. There's more stuff we got to be doing. In terms of, other things to prepare for annual conference, a big thing is reading the pre-conference workbook, and I killed some trees to actually print out the 2021 conference workbook. I only printed out one because I figured we could just pass it around. The
21 or
21.
Yeah, it is the
Yeah.
5th years, yeah.
Yeah,
5th years is still happening.
exactly. But yeah,
I know what you,
if you want to flip through what one looks like,
I
and
know.
I'll just basically,
I could try it.
yeah. But essentially, if you go online and access it, or if you want me to email you my copy, I'd be perfectly happy to. Essentially, there's a couple of big sections in there. There's going to be a bunch of resolutions, which are things that we are going to have 1 or more votes on, depending on if there's things like amendments. There's going to be potentially some reports that might be in there. Sometimes there's reports from things like the conference trustees, where, they're talking about, okay, this is, how some of our processes work. Maybe there's some churches who are being, closed or discontinued. And then the other massive part of the workbook is the conference budget for the following year. So we're going to be voting on 2024 whenever we're voting on the budget during 2023. So the fun thing is that it is a really, really big document that, it usually takes me a couple days to really, not just read it through and skim it, but really to be like, okay, these are the things that we do every year versus these are the things that are different or changed. There may be also some rules updates for how the actual annual conference is held, or how different agencies in the church work. Because, for instance, I know that for the Conference Board of Laity, we are going to have at least, one report and resolution about changing some of our structure and like the amount we're able to reimburse for lay equalization, for instance. So there's different stuff, but in terms of the actual like action items and stuff, that's anything that's going to be voted on. And whenever you're reading through, look at the language. Are there any changes that you would want to make? Like, whenever things are before the body, we can make amendments to the language. Where, you know, there was one where maybe it's just a phrase that we're like, this really doesn't feel right, you know, maybe we should change just that phrase to be something a little different. And that's something that as you're planning out the people from your area that are gonna be, you know, going to conference, be meeting with them and talking with them about how they feel. If there's any resources that do come out from the conference on like, you know, maybe a particular piece, then review that together and see what you think. Does that all make sense for how you prepare? The other thing I want to caution you is that there may be other things that get voted on that will not be in the workbook. You're going to want to check for announcements because, for instance, last year there was a action item that was on responsible firearm legislation that was voted on that was not part of the packet. It was sent out during annual conference and then was voted on because there was time. So I could pass that around too. So again, just, you know, watch out for, there may be things that get added and
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
yeah. So in terms of other reminders, make sure you, I guess, make doubly sure you attend the laity session. I know we already talked about that. And then the other big piece is familiarizing yourself with the schedule once that is posted. And I'm gonna go over the schedule just a little bit in a sec for like how you actually live through and survive annual conference. So before we move on, are there any questions or is there anything from people that have been here before that I missed?
I don't think you missed anything, Robin, but I think it seems to me, my perspective is the time from the time you get the information to annual conference is not a big window to have conversation. And that's just the reality of the way it is. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's a big deal to get all this conference stuff printed. But the more you can do that, even if it's just at a council meeting or something. But that's our challenge.
Now, we went over the timeline of deadlines yesterday
Yeah.
at our meeting. It's 2 pages long of what's going to happen each day.
Yeah.
And now we just have to make sure that the congregations all over the state of Wisconsin comply with it. And there's always, I can guarantee there will be the inevitable 25 will say, well, we missed it, but can we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, you can't, because we have to tell the rest of the world.
Yeah. Do you know roughly whenever the workbook will be available? Not like a particular date, but like roughly.
We're aiming for March.
Okay, so sometime in
I mean,
March.
Okay,
those are the dates that are aimed right now, but
Mhm.
the reality, when the rubber hits the road,
Yeah.
it depends on the rest of you out there in the world, you know, that bring in what you need to give us.
Yeah. So in terms of all of that good stuff, really, whenever you're looking at that schedule, there's going to be like, I would put it like 3 main types of sessions that you should be aware of. There's going to be the business sessions, which are going to be where we're actually voting on stuff. Then there's going to be worship services. There's several worship services that are held over the 3 days. And then there's Bible study. So to go into those in a bit more detail, as a member of annual conference with voice and vote, you need to plan to be present during all business sessions, because if you aren't, then you're not using your voice and vote. And there's very, very few, if any, matters that you can't vote on. So it's going to be a good use of your time. It's not like you're going to be sitting through stuff that doesn't matter. And that's something that the planning and program committee, that they spend a lot of time making sure that time is being spent wisely as much as they can ahead of time. Sometimes things have to
We
change.
work on it for a year.
Yeah.
We take 1 month off after annual conference, and then we are nothing. Every month we have a meeting.
Yeah. So,
Need a month off after conference.
so that's something where, you know, maybe if you know that your clergy person isn't planning on being there, or if there's other people that you hear that just aren't planning on going, like really encourage them to be there, because if you're choosing not to vote, then your church and its perspective is not being heard. Yeah.
How many people can your church have sent?
Can you what now?
How many people can your church send?
I believe it depends on the size of your church. I believe that you get at least 1, and for larger churches, they may get more, like Sun Prairie, I think gets more, because you're trying to roughly account for similar numbers of people, I think. For a lot of churches, that's going to be just 1 person. And you have to be really, really huge to get more. There's also something called lay equalization, where a lot of times you're going to have our retired clergy that are going to bump up that clergy number of people that can vote who are clergy. So if you are not actually a lay member, but you still want to vote at annual conference, contact the district office to see if there are slots open for lay equalization, which will allow you to, there's a certain number of laity that are supposed to come from churches, and then there's a larger number of clergy. Lay equalization is trying to close that laity gap between the laity and churches and other, conference roles up to try to get roughly equal parity. So if you want to contact the district office, they're, right over here in Sun Prairie, and you can also find their contact info on the conference website. If there's also somebody who is just super interested in being at annual conference and you already have your lay member, what do you do? Again, point them towards lay equalization, because that may be a way for them to attend and for them to actually be able to do something and not just sit outside of the plenary session. So something that I didn't include here, but I probably should have, whenever we're talking about the plenary area, that is the area where people can vote, can sit. Let's say you have a spouse that is not a lay member, they cannot sit in the plenary section. They have to sit in the back in a little gated off area, because we want to make sure that only people who have actually been elected from a local church or gone through some kind of process and been vetted actually are able to vote.
But they can hear the discussion and everything.
Exactly. You can still be in the room. You just
Mhm.
can't be in the part of the room that matters. And whenever they are announcing where the plenary area is, they will be making this very clear that, anybody at these tables is okay. And if you're not, then you gotta be over there. So yeah, that is one of the things that they do a really good job of announcing. In terms of worship, there are several worship services, and I really find them to be super meaningful. There's always going to be an opening worship. There's going to be a retirement service for all the clergy that retired this year, as well as a memorial service for all of the clergy, their spouses, as well as surviving spouses. So let's say that a clergy person passes away and then their spouse who survives then passes away. Both people get recognized at annual conference. And, these worship services, there are committees that work all year on making them super meaningful.
I'm making memorial ribbons for that very service as we speak.
So there's always really good music. There's really skilled preachers. There's just a lot of significance in the life of our church and in our clergy. So, be looking out for that. There might be a clergy that who's been in your church in the past that, they're recognizing. And then finally, there's something called Bible study. Usually these Bible study sessions are optional, or usually like the first thing in the morning after breakfast, but the speakers and the material that they have is top notch, and it really helps you start your day off right. So if you maybe have to spend that time for driving, or if you otherwise just can't be out of bed that early in the morning, it's one of those where I'm not going to say you got to be there, but if you can be there, you should. So does that make sense in terms of just generally what you find at annual conference?
Mhm.
So now the slide that I have says the experience, aka how to survive annual conference, because there's just a lot to do in order to be fulfilling your role, but also like taking care of yourself. And that really includes, taking notes, plan out how you're going to keep track of everything that's happening at annual conference. In terms of the ways that I tend to do that, you can either be writing notes, on paper. I've taken my computer to a conference before, just figure out what works for you. And you can use the conference workbook, as at least we're going to have at least this much. There may be more, but we can deal with that then, in order to be prepared. You can also be really expanding your circle of people. This is a great opportunity to meet people outside your local church and across the state and the world. I am from the West Virginia Conference. Yeah. And I moved here during the pandemic, which is a great way to meet people. The fun thing is that it's mostly other people from West Virginia, and that's cool. I get to see people from over close to Maryland. That's great. But here in Wisconsin, we have representatives from across the world. This past year, we had a delegation from South Korea where, we had their bishop and like a bunch of, his folks, who are, involved in the actions of conference. There are other people, missionaries, there's a really good opportunity to just get to meet people from all over the place.
This year, we possibly will have a delegation from Bolivia.
Ooh,
and from Korea.
cool.
I'm the hospitality hostess too, so I get to take care of all these people.
Man, you're just super useful having you in class. This is fun. So yeah, just, be mindful of, new connections that you might make while you're there. And maybe there's some former pastors that you might want to just, say hi to or get coffee with that, this is the perfect opportunity to be, really getting to see people again. So, it's going to be a lot, but that's one of the things that I really find helps lift your spirits. And then finally, conference is exhausting. Like, it's a lot of sitting and listening to things and the votes and it can be really stressful whenever there's really sensitive topics that are up for discussion. So think about how you're going to spend your off hours. Are you going to be getting dinner with folks? Are you going to, have like a book to read in the evening or watch TV? I don't know what works best for you, but just make sure you're taking care of yourself because, it's really important work, but that doesn't mean it's not challenging. And for those of you who have attended, do you have any other suggestions for how you make the most of your annual conference experience?
There's going to be a prayer room this year.
Oh, good.
So that's another resource of just having the place of quiet where you can just kind of sit down and relax and breathe.
Is there going to be somebody there to pray with you or just kind of a,
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. People praying with you is great.
We see friends.
Mm.
Go out to eat with friends that live up there.
Yeah.
So that's a
And
bonus.
as hospitality person for annual conference, I will be in the registration area. And anytime you have any questions or comments or want to talk, you can come to me. I will be there from Thursday through Monday. I would be more than happy to see your smiling faces. Come and introduce yourself. Connie Meyer. I take care of a lot of the stuff, all of the translation equipment and the sound equipment for hearing impaired. And I do all the volunteers that are going to be scattered throughout the K1 Center. Come and talk to me. Come and be a volunteer.
Yeah.
I would love to help you greet the people into the city of Green Bay.
Definitely. Yeah, sorry, my
You can
computer's
even
making-
sign up for it when you register for annual conference. There's a place where you can put your name down and Connie Meyer will be contacting you with a smiling face. Yeah.
And in terms of those roles, correct me if I'm wrong, Connie, but those are things like being an usher.
Yep.
For like the different worship services. There's usually collections that are taken for different conference missions. Oh, I didn't even talk about that. Oh, that's important. Remind me to come back to that. You can also be a teller.
A teller, you could be a greeter, just walking around the hallways, helping people find the bathroom, or just, where's the registration area, where's the plenary area, because the K1 Center is pretty big and we use the whole space. We're going to be using both floors this year.
Wow.
So there's going to be a lot of walking around and a lot of people wondering where they're going. And those are the greeters that I will be having that will be helping direct you to where you need to go, hopefully.
And to circle back, I don't think I explained the term teller. A teller is somebody who actually helps with the voting process, where if they're doing like just a show of hands or something, they might be going out and helping the bishop to actually count the shows of hands and such to make sure that we're actually getting whatever specific number we need to get for a measure to pass. I think that if we're doing a lot of voting online, it might not be as.
We're still doing the voting online.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
worked out better because of so many people attending conference by Zoom. We have to be.
So
All
that's
inclusive.
the other thing to watch out for once you register is, there's going to be a lot of information on how you actually vote at annual conference. There is a specific website.
Yeah, there'll be a tutorial. on
Yeah,
that.
there's a whole tutorial session they have, but essentially you go to a website and it's very easy to just do a little form that, like, whenever there's a vote, your website will refresh with the vote, and then you do whatever your yes, no. It's usually not a maybe, this is the abstain. And or maybe if it's some other kind of selecting things kind of a vote. Make sure you have an internet connected device, because you'll need that to be able to make sure that you can vote, and there will be tech people who are able to assist.
Yep.
But yeah, thank you for that information. I wasn't sure how they'd be handling that going forward,
It'll-
because
yep,
we
be
kind of
soon.
had to do it online for COVID whenever there are people attending by Zoom as well.
And even though it's been around a while, some of us are less adept at doing that than
Mhm.
others.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you might also just want to be prepared just in case you need to help other people, who may be around you, who may be struggling, or maybe the device just isn't working out well. Let's see. Man, we're doing really good on time. I'm trying to aim to get out here by noon at the latest, so we're doing good. The other thing that I want to talk about is the post-annual conference tasks you got to complete. I mean, the big thing is getting your report in. You got to figure out how to take all the wonderful experiences of annual conference and actually turn that into a report that you deliver to your church, or at least the church council, within 3 months. And for an idea of the support that you have for that, I'm going to pass around this year's annual conference summary that is put together by the annual conference. This is a 9-page document that you can just kind of flip through, and they just kind of lay out just in text, what happens at annual conference. I failed to print out a copy of my report, which I think is better, but don't put me on that. But what I try to do is,
report. I've seen
yeah.
the report.
Basically what I do is I take annual conference and I divide it into 4 big pieces. There's always going to be reports that, the things that they talk about before the body. Maybe that's going to be talking about the budget, for instance. Then there's going to be resolutions, the things that actually get voted on. And so I want to tell them how the votes went. Then I like to give a summary of what happened at the worship services, because, it can be really interesting to talk about, we had the Native Americans do a drum circle at the beginning to welcome us into the space and recognize the land that we're on. At the memorial service, there's this really cool reading, all this stuff. And you can have pictures. There's all kinds of pictures that the conference puts on their social media. So you can even include pictures if you want to. And then finally, I talk about the ministry that happens at annual conference. Usually there's a collection for like the United Methodist in-gathering for like mission supplies. Usually for the past couple of years, there have been these wonderful videos whenever they're tabulating the votes. So everybody's voted, votes are closed, and they have to figure out exactly, whether it passed or not and count up all the votes. And they will show these, just a couple minute videos where maybe it'll be church and society, or our United Methodist camps, or all kinds of these other interesting things. Sometimes ministry awards will get put there. So I usually try to summarize all the amazing things that are happening across our conference and across the world that are really useful for just, not getting bogged down in all the crap that happens and all of the difficult things. There's a lot that's still really hopeful. So I try to get that across to my congregation as well. And I can include a copy of my latest report for this past year, as well on the follow-up email I'm going to send.
And as well as you do it, I always feel that you never can really convey the feeling of being there. Somebody's sitting out there and going,
yeah. And there's only so much you can do. So you really do have to recognize that, you're still probably going to be the bigger nerd about it than anybody else in your church, or at least that's usually been the case for me. But yeah.
Report. Close the shades, light a candle, read this report. Give them a mood that somebody special.
Well, and I usually try to write a letter as like my face page too, of like, this is what it was really like to be here. These are the things that I really am excited, to call out. So you don't have to write an 11-page one like I do, but it can also be really helpful if you do write out an actual report. Then you could send that out over, letters or emails, so that, that gets out to the congregation if they're not in worship, or for shut-ins. You can also be using that whenever you're presenting to, not just read it, but just go over the bullet points, whatever makes most sense to you. In terms of being able to revive your memory of what happened, whole annual conference will be live streamed and recorded. And I have found those recordings to be very useful, very long, but very useful for, needing to rewatch sections, or like sometimes I want to quote people just right. Or, the bishop says something really lovely and I just want to, write that down. He does that a lot. So I will a lot of times use those recordings to not just, put that in my report for, hey, if you want to watch, but, for making sure that I remember things right. So, be thinking about how you're going to share what you learned with your whole congregation so that they all can be informed about the state of our church. And, also be thinking about, there's going to be a big nominations report that it gets voted on. It's going to be separate from the workbook, but, also sent out usually ahead of time. And that nominations report lays out all of the district and annual conference committees and boards and all kinds of cool stuff we're doing. So be thinking about, is there any place you would want to connect to be able to serve? Let's see. I want to backtrack a little bit. If we're going to go to, it's like the second page and the thing here. I was trying to adapt this from, there's this nice little guidelines book. They make them for a lot of different church roles. And there's one where they put the lay leader and the lay member to annual conference together, which is totally not confusing for these two roles. But there's a good section on the kinds of leadership skills that, people in these roles should cultivate, and that I wanted to really call out. So that can be advocacy. You're elected from your local congregation, but ultimately you vote as an individual. You vote your own conscience, and you really have a responsibility to earnestly consider the resolutions and reports before the body so that you can be informed about the impacts that these are going to have. There's a lot of weight to the things that we do, and we need to make sure we're considering that well. There's also nurturing. United Methodism has historically been strongest when its laity are empowered to do the work of the church, because clergy can't carry the whole church themselves. They're usually just one person. And you really should be encouraging the people of your church to take an interest in what happens at annual conference. That can happen through your report to the congregation. I've had people that just, I never really understood what this was. And now it is a lot clearer, and I'm, able to understand it a lot more. That can be really heartening whenever you can hear stuff like that, because just knowing what's going on is really important to getting people from knowing to doing something about it and being involved. There's also communication. You gotta effectively express yourself in meetings, worship, and congregation conversations. And you have voice at annual conference, which means that you may request to speak for or against motions before the body. Be prepared to have the courage to do that if you feel led, and that's going to happen in a room with hundreds of people. And, that can be kind of nerve-wracking. I did that once in West Virginia because, there seemed to be missing information, and I wanted there to be, that information in there for people to be considering. So, was that nerve-wracking? Yes. But do I have a picture of myself doing it? Also, yes. So really, make sure you're able to use that, your active listening skills to listen to what other people are saying about it too, and their perspectives, because you really got to use your voice and vote to lift up what matters in your particular context. I think there's somebody on the Zoom. Okay. So let's see. You are also a servant leader as a lay member, so you should be active and connected to the ministries of the local church, as we outlined. According to the discipline, that's serving on a lot of committees, but you should also just have relationships with all the different ministries in the church. The Sunday school classes, youth groups, women and men's groups, Bible studies, food pantries, etc., because all of these ministries are going to be impacted by the business of annual conference, whether you want them to or not. And, that's, at the end of the day, that's really what matters. The ministry of annual conference is making sure that local churches can run effectively. And whenever we kind of aren't thinking about that, then sometimes we're not keeping the real thing. And then finally, annual conference just takes a lot of preparation and study. So if you are employed or otherwise have regular commitments, make sure to make arrangements as soon as possible so that you can attend all of conference and not just the days that are on the weekend. The lady session will be held before conference, and all the other materials should be available for at least a couple of weeks ahead of time. So make sure that you're studying all those materials, you're studying the schedule, and just have kind of a general knowledge of the Book of Discipline so that you're able to go to different paragraphs if people are making references and all that jazz. So with all those kind of leadership skills, are there any that you would add or have questions about or anything?
Logistic question.
Yeah.
In the in years past, I know the schedule is not out yet, but in years past, does the conference typically begin in the morning on the Friday?
Yes, I think that it starts with like 11 a.m. or something like that.
Yes, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
right now the bishop they're gonna have a discussion on that on Tuesday.
Okay. So that's one of the things where you might want to drive up the evening before, because like if it's going to be driving like 6 hours or something to get there, it's not for us, but for other parts of the state, getting to Green Bay is a lot. So, that might be driving the evening beforehand to be there, or I'm probably just going to drive up the morning of, get up with enough time and everything. But it just really depends on where you're at, what your transportation is like, all of that good stuff. And as they get more information about Monday, we should also know if that is someplace where there might be potentially voting or not. At this point, it's usually not, but this is a special year. Man, I didn't talk about the special year. So this year has a lot of crap involved. And I use that because there's just a lot. There's going to be general conference in 2024, and that means that we may need to elect delegates to go there because we have some that have been around for a while, and some of them may want to roll off, or there are instances where people have had illnesses or deaths and therefore cannot serve. So be watching out for those. If we do have to do delegate elections, then they will have like, I think, a bio sheet for everybody to just kind of say where they're from, what they, what their viewpoints are, so that we can make an informed decision of whenever we're voting on laity, we know who those laity are. And we will only ever be voting for laity for general conference, same way that clergy only vote for clergy. So that's how we get represented at jurisdictional and general conference. Then the other thing that we have that is before us is going to be the disaffiliation vote for, basically there will be a single ballot that will contain all the churches that have done their homework, they have all their stuff together, and the conference has vetted them and said that yes, they have fulfilled everything, please annual conference approve it. So whenever the churches are on that ballot, we are not voting on whether they are fit to leave, we are just approving if they should leave. And I think that it is really not in our best interest to vote that down, because if they have gotten to that point where their names are on that ballot, they have done a heck of a lot of work and discernment and vetting from the conference to, they should have the right to leave. And if we keep them, then we're just keeping them in a relationship that no longer works. So that is one where just, it's going to be before the body, but, that's kind of the situation around it, is just, they have done a lot of work and we need to respect that work and, allow them to be new ministries and have that kind of new life.
It seems like that's going to be a really big, important vote that's going to go very fast
I think so.
at the conference level.
Yeah, because there's
of
really
all the
no
work that's been done up to that point.
and there's really no discussion. Like, if you're not informed on what the disaffiliation process is, I'm sure that there will be a brief summary of how we got to this point. But really, the pathway that was approved at this past year's annual conference is really meant to protect us, the churches that are not leaving, as well as the rest of the conference and everything too. So there has been a that kind of thinking, not just trying to pander to the churches that are leaving or anything, like our interests are being looked out for as well. So I just really encourage you to be prepared for that, because it's a big step. You know, these people have been in ministry for us for a very long time, and you know, I don't think that we should hinder them in where they feel led. So watch out for that. And is there anything else I'm missing, Connie? I think those are the two big things, other than just there might be general conference resolutions.
I think you've done a very, very thorough job.
Thanks.
Congratulations. It's a lot to talk about.
I know. So I know that this is a lot. We're at like 11:30, so I just want to open it up for, are there any other questions that you all have? Comments, thoughts, anything? Because I have a plan to lead us out, and I want to make sure that we, you know, address any other concerns that you have. I mean, please feel free to reach out to me after the session if you have anything else come up. As the district lay leader, you know, this is my job, is to make sure that you all have the tools and, you know, resources that you need to do your jobs. And as part of my email that was sent out for the class, which I'll be copying all the resources on for you, Rex, I have a whole resource sheet for these lay roles in the church. And that has a lot of good stuff on it, like why am I not thinking of anything? There's a lot of stuff from the general, like Board of Discipleship. There is the guidelines books. There's even webinars that you can watch if there's still, you know, you want to see how this is all supposed to work. So I just really encourage you to take those resources, use them as much as you need to, and just know that, you know, this is a role that is not meant to just act on its own and not have any support. That, you know, if you just are having trouble understanding something, like, you know, you're probably not alone in that. And, you know, please be asking questions and making sure that you are informed on what's happening. So with that, are there any questions we got?
I only have an observation. I don't know, shocked is the right word, but close. How few people attended this meeting.
Yeah, I think that part of it is.
I wasn't expecting a full house, but and maybe you partially answered that, Robin, already. I mean, because the system behind it maybe hasn't been great. But having said that, I mean, it is a significant connection to annual conference. And so this is like, wow, we got some work to do.
Well, and that's the thing. I put these events on the conference website so that if you went on there and looked, you know, you could find them. These classes were also Mike Zahn over in the North Central District. He has also been, you know, sending out information as well to that district, because, you know, you can attend by Zoom from anywhere. So there may be other people at other sessions that attend from other districts. Like I think my lay leader class has a couple folks from like the Southeast and stuff. But no, I mean, it's a real challenge to be trying to get things started again with classes and stuff, because there's been such a lapse. We've gotten out of the habit, and I don't think we really know each other anymore across churches that don't already have connections that way.
But even in our church, we have people who do not have internet. I mean, we can't assume that everybody's got that.
And that's one of the things that, you know, at this point, I just wanted to do something. Something's better than nothing, because then I could learn from it. Because I think that part of it is that for churches that don't have folks in these roles, like, I'm going to start talking to those clergy, because, you know, that's kind of a job. And, you know, I can come after them and be like, you know, hey, this is important. And I think that through our district superintendent, I might also see if we can make like a packet of all this information that we just send out to clergy. Because if you think about a clergy in that position, you got, you know, all these different lay roles that you got to train in your local church. And that's just a lot for people to be figuring out what they're supposed to do. So if we can be supporting them in that and feeling like they don't have to reinvent the wheel for every lay person that, you know, that can be really helpful.
Ideally, when we go through charge conference, every church is supposed to have their lay representative elected. Ideally. And as part of that, we know who they are, and we can get their contact information. And I mean, if nothing else, we could send a letter, put together a mailing list and send a letter to say, hey, here's how we're going to be doing this, directly to them in the mail. Everybody has a mailbox.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and plus there's, you know, other outreach we can do, like, you know, if people are interested in having like quarterly group that gets together, like, hey, or maybe we even have a read-through party for the conference workbook that, if you just want to kind of go through it together as a group,
Yeah,
what questions
Like a
do we
book
have?
club.
Yeah, a horrifying book club.
Horrifying book club, yes.
So, I think that that's also what I'm going to be looking for in the future, as well as, what opportunities do we have to get people from different churches together and fulfill some of these needs. So I really appreciate that, Mike. Yeah.
Well, we've been around a long time, and it's, it used to be 1,000 people annual conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot less now. And it's certainly a challenge. And I think that at the district level, I just want to be making sure that people have the resources and the tools they need to do their jobs.
Yep.
Because a lot of times people can do in very effective ministry. And if you just have that little bit of support, it just makes everything better. So, to close us out, I included on the back some Bible verses to empower lay members to annual conference. It also, spoiler alert, if you're going to the lay leader class, it's the same ones for the lay leader. So let's go ahead and, everybody has a copy of these. So let's have, one person read each of these 4 Bible verses as a way to close out our time together. So who wants to go first?
I can go first.
All right, Connie.
Ephesians 4:2-6. Conduct yourself with all humility, gentleness, and patience. Accept each other with love, and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties you together. You are one body and one spirit, just as God also called you in one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all.
Thank you, Connie.
You know that those who rule the Gentiles show off their authority over them, and their high-ranking officials order them around. But that's not the way it will be with you. Whoever wants to be first among you will be your slave, just as the human one didn't come to be served, but rather to serve and to give his life to liberate many people.
All right, let's aim for somebody on the Zoom for some variety.
I'll do, Matthew. I was hungry and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick and you took care of me. I was a prisoner and you visited me.
I can do the last one if you want.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. Or Christine.
That's okay. Hebrews 10:24-25. Let's also think about how to motivate each other to show love and to do good works. Don't stop meeting together with other believers, which some people have gotten into the habit of doing. Instead, encourage each other, especially as you see the day drawing near.
And yeah, this is certainly not an exhaustive list of things that, there's a lot of passages of scripture that remind you that you're a beloved child of God and you're called to be a shepherd of God's people. And as much as that is, a lot, it's also really exciting. And I just really give thanks for all of you and for your ministry. So thank you so much for spending all this time for us. And
thank you, Robin.
Yeah, let's have a closing prayer, to put a cap on this. So dear Lord, thank you so much for our time together and for all of the ministry and resources and wonderful things that we have gotten to share and experience together. May we go forth from this place as people who are committed to informing your church about the things that matter. Guide and direct us as we navigate the complex tasks and issues in front of us, so that we can be the best representatives and leaders we can be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So I'm going to be sending up a follow-up email. It's going to have lots of resources. There's going to be a survey, and I really encourage you to fill that out. You can also just call me, that's a thing. And I'm just really glad that, we got to be together. So anyways, thank y'all so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. We got out of here early. Woo-hoo.
Thank
Stay
you.
warm, you guys.
Yeah. Bye.
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 So they were just